Warm welcome back to the Ericsson's live broadcast program here from Barcelona. We're in the booth here, and it's a very exclusive experience for you in US and Canada because we've closed down everything right now. We're going to cover a few key questions for you. Tonight is a night of energy efficient networks. So the way we're going to do it, we're going to cover 4 different topics here. We're going to give you the big picture. We're going to dive into the Ericsson radio systems and what we're doing there. We're also going to cover the indoors, and before we wrap up, we're going to cover transport and site. This is not only a talking session. You got the opportunity here to put your questions in the chat and ask what you are interested in. So each of these different 4 modules, we have added a Q&A piece associated with each of them. So fire your questions in the chat here. So where I would like to start tonight is a conversation here where I have the great honor to invite Jeanette Erikvist, a great friend of mine. We're here to talk about the big picture of what energy efficient networks, why does that really matter?
Oh, well, good question. And thank you, Peter. It's fantastic to be here. And obviously, where could we be in a better place than this with a globe and what it's radiating to us. So if you look at the bigger picture and what it really means to us, I think it's putting ourselves into that context and our industry in that context, I think is the quite interesting part here. And really, if you look at our industry, as a total, we are touching the lives of people. 70% of people are being touched by our networks, services and products on a daily basis. So with that, of course, we're having a great impact in itself. But looking at the carbon emission, our industry actually only is 1.5% of the carbon emissions is coming from our industry. And we look at it from an energy consumption, it's less than 4% is really related to our own industry.
Okay.
So, but with that, we have to say, so, well, since we have such a great impact on industries around us, together with our customers, other stakeholders, but also the societies in which we're playing, we see that we are the enabler are really driving sustainability. So when we say that we're an enabler, if we work with all these adjacent industry, we can really drive down the carbon emissions with 15%. Really across it all. And that, of course, is making something, that's important impact. But when we talk about sustainability, apart from the traditional levels, what we talk about is energy performance. And energy performance is really 2 different factors that are playing together. So if you look at our industry in total, the consumption of data traffic and the data volume has increased with more than 300 times the past 10 years. And those numbers, of course, are immense. And with that, the importance here is twofold. So the one part is our customers need to be able to continue increasing the network performance of the network while they need to continue driving down the energy consumptions. And this is really when we talk about the energy performance of our network. How can we help and enable our customer to do that? And as a part of that, make sure that we are curving the energy curve and make sure that we're breaking it to really get to the net zero targets that we as a company have set out for ourselves to 2040.
It's quite amazing. I think that when you say this, or more than 300x in traffic growth, we did that with 63% of energy increase during the 4G era. But and that is like those relationships are quite mind-boggling. But if you look at it and saying, what can we at Ericsson, what can we do to help our customers on their journey to both reducing energy consumption, but also to the broader carbon footprint reduction?
Yeah, and I think that we can, to begin with, maybe you're talking about the shift really between our generations. I think that's the really biggest driver for our customers in how they can make an impact themselves and reduce their emission working with Ericsson. And that's really looking to the portfolio and how it's evolving. So if we look from 4G to 5G in every generations have been much more power efficient. We set out for ourselves targets at 2022, our 5G portfolio would be 10 times more energy efficient than a 4G portfolio, and we reach those targets. So just by modernizing their networks, our customers are really reducing the footprint on the carbon emission.
So by going to 5G, we create a 10x improvement.
You see, that in itself is a huge impact. Yeah. But then also if we go more to a granular level, and I know our colleagues are going to talk more about it, is really what can we offer them from a software perspective, what can we offer them within the portfolio as such, is really what are the feature functions, how can they make sure that they're running and operating the networks in a more efficient way. So we are talking about sleep mode, making sure that when there's lower traffic in the networks, how do you power down? How do you make sure that you turn down the power amplifiers of the networks so they're actually cooling down? And for example, we have worked with Rogers, our customers in Canada, where they noted that their traffic has increased with 500% since 2015. And with that, then they needed to make sure, well, of course, they will continue looking at renewable energy, etc., and we can talk more about that. But just by implementing these features that we actually can offer them in the network, they are saving 25 gigawatts per year, and that's 3,000 tons of carbon emissions. I mean, that's a huge amounts. So it's really twofold. It's partly what they can do themselves, but with us, they're both the portfolio, modernizing a network, but also implementing what we can offer them from a software perspective.
Yeah. So what about Ericsson? Are we eating our own dog food in this area? What do we do to drive down our footprint and our...
So we are drinking our own champagne, Peter.
We're drinking our own champagne.
Of course we are.
Yeah.
But also in nowadays, of course, we've been pioneering this forever. This has been always very close to the heart of Ericsson. Anyone knows that we've been there. We are even reporting on our sustainability efforts for the past 25 years. That's more than any other actor in the industry. And what we have said is that we are going to be at net zero targets at 2040. So really put those aggressive targets. But since we all also make sure we're putting it closer to home, that we all want to make sure that we can be part of seeing changes earlier than that. What we also said is that by 2030, we will be net zero in our own operations. And together with our suppliers, we will reduce that to 50% together with our supply chain. So we are getting 2040 net zero across our whole value chain. So that's an amazing effort. But then we also other things. So for example, we have our 5G smart factory in the US, in Texas, where we really are utilizing, showcasing how you can drive both in the industry but then for ourselves. So the factory is running at 100% renewable energy. Yeah. And also by implementing, for example, water waste efforts, we are 75%, using 75% less water than in a similar type of vicinity. And then looking at kind of what we said and how you're operating, how do you operate efficient? So by automation, our productivity level has increased. So looking at per employee, we have doubled the productivity levels than we would usually see. But at the same time, it's 65% less of waste and 75% increase in production lead time. So it's really showcasing that it's not either or. You can implement these things and you can increase your efficiencies and ways of working while you're also working towards those sustainability goals.
But I think what I see is a little bit like our grandparents, perhaps they had a blue suit and it was oily when they came back and was clean a few weeks in the summer. But this is, I think the very important lesson also is like our children could actually envision a work in a factory because your white dresses is green and environmentally friendly.
Absolutely.
And it's automated, so it's not the same environment as it used to be.
Yeah. It's very high-tech and futuristic, for sure, what we see.
No, but it's almost like I did an internship in an ASIC factory in 1984, and it feels like it's there, but on the whole factory level.
That is true. Very true.
Yeah. So the final question I have for you is a little bit about, we saw a report coming out from ABI recently that was ranking the whole telecom industry, so 80 vendors has been surveyed. Can you tell us a little bit about what that report said?
So that, of course, is a very proud moment, any recognition. But this recognition was, I think, it was really about what we can do for our customer. I think that's why it makes even more impact and more important, because it was really rating our capabilities of helping our customers and the operators to reach to net zero emissions. So that's really what they were looking at. So if we look at the different categories, overall, Ericsson was number one in what we did in our networks and how we drive our business. So we were number one on that. And so we were number one in the radio portfolio overall, and they were looking at the 5G portfolio, we're looking at the massive MIMO portfolio, we're also looking about the intelligence part, so on an AI software, and we know we, for example, have a great collaboration with universities in Quebec, where we're working with Gaia, our AI center, together with the universities to drive AI-driven intelligence in the networks and then operationally, and that was being recognized. But even on the transport side, so it goes across all of our portfolio. So I think that was kind of the recognition was in all those areas, and in really showcasing what we can do, and it's good to see how we can work with our customer, because there are certain things they need to do on themselves. So if we look at, for example, T-Mobile came out with a very aggressive target around the renewable energy. So they have said that all of their operations and networks operation should be 100% on renewable energy. And that's obviously fantastic. But we also know that the cost for energy, even renewable such, it's increasing. So any energy costs are increasing, and for geopolitical reasons and others. So they really need to work on the other part, is really looking at the network in itself, and then obviously how they're operating and driving it. And that's really why it's so important that we are helping them to really drive it and make sure that happens on that side as well. And that's why, this recognition overall is really showcasing that Ericsson is number one from a report perspective, but we're really the number one vendor to help our customers reach their targets.
That's when I read the report, that was fascinating to me. The amount of categories that they evaluated, and the amount of categories that we consider, hey, if you do all of these having an impact, and it's like a lot of small creeks going to be turned into a big river. So I think I've seen that we have a few questions from the audience here. Can we start with the first one?
Yeah, sure. Hi. The first question, how do we best balance rising energy costs now with long-term climate actions?
I think it's really by maybe tying back to what you just said. It's not the either or. So I think sometimes we get focused on one action and one thing to do. So for example, we can talk very much about renewable energy and how we need to focus on that side in itself, and that is good, obviously, in itself. But you need to work on all these different aspects, and that's why I said we need to continue working on our portfolio, ensuring that we are driving even more energy efficient portfolio. We will need to work on e-waste and make sure we're working with recycling and e-waste across our portfolio, but also with our customers, looking at how do we not just operate, but then plan our networks as efficient as we can, and then how we operate them, that together with renewables. So I think it's really like how to drive not just what's going on here and now, but knowing that as we're doing that for a long-term perspective, we're just increasing and improving it from a long-term perspective.
And I think it's very much like our own house at home. So when we see the bills go through the roof, then it's like, hey, what can we do? Can we get solar panels on? What actions can we take here
There's
and now?
so many aspects of it, yes.
Now, this is a great introduction, Jeanette. Thank you very much for coming here tonight.
Yes.
I'll let you off the hook to run away to your dinner. And meanwhile, we'll take the next step. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me, Peter.
Yeah, pleasure.
Enjoy.
So now we're going to dive into a little bit about the radio portfolio and seeing what we at Ericsson is doing. And why do we start with the radio portfolio? Well, the most important part of that is like this is where a lot of the energy consumption is in a network. And as we discussed here, things that you can take down, which you have to evolve at a significant pace, because this is where a lot of the energy consumed, but also where the traffic growth is going to drive incremental energy if we don't do anything. So, warm welcome, Sasheka.
Hi, Peter. How are you?
I'm doing really good. So you're going to help us talk a little bit about here what we can do on approaching this from a more holistic perspective when we're looking at the whole network. What can you tell us there?
Okay, so when it comes to network energy consumption, the key component is really to focus on RAN as a priority, because more than 75% of the energy consumption of the network comes from RAN. So that's a good starting point. So in the RAN, before we go into details of it, there's some key other aspects that we can use. So when it comes to technology, 5G is the most energy efficient technology. So if the UE base is there, switching to 5G is a key. And then when it comes to capacity sites, really utilizing 5G and our TDD is key, because again, for high capacity sites, there's no other more energy efficient machine you can put there than NRTDD. So 1 gigabyte of data can be transferred with 10 times more energy efficiency. So that's kind of like the baseline. But now, if you look at the pillars, we really have to look at hardware, software, and machine AI, ML working holistically together. So I'll use an analogy of a house, right? So if you have a house and a lighting system, and you really want to optimize the lighting system in the house, so what do you do first? You look at your light bulbs that's there. You can switch to more energy efficient light bulbs. So that's really your hardware. So when it comes to our hardware in the RAN, radio is the most energy efficient, energy consuming block. So switching to energy efficient radios is key there. So there are several things we do in our portfolio. One of the things is, of course, more energy efficient radios, so radios with gallium nitride power amplifiers, and also consolidating bands. Now, the challenge with energy efficiency is not just reducing consumption, but reducing consumption while increasing capacity, right? So how do you do that? So to introduce more bands to increase capacity, really you need to consolidate the number of bands in one radio. So multi-band radios, high energy efficient radios, and with massive MIMO, wider IBW radios. So if CSPs, for instance, gets more spectrum in the future, they don't need to add another radio if you have high IBW radio. So that's one of the things we are launching with 600 megahertz IBW radios. So that's just a touch on hardware. So now you have the most energy efficient hardware, or light bulbs in an analogy, right? Now, how do you look at turning off those lights or dimming the lights if you're not in the room? It's the same concept with your RAN, right? If you have low traffic, do you really need to have all that hardware on? That's where our software features come into play, right? So use the software features to optimize the use of your radios in the most energy efficiency way, depending on your traffic, right? Now, going back to our analogy of the lights, so you can turn off those lights in a different way. You can manually go turn it off, by person, or look at a time and say, okay, every day I'm going to turn this off. Or you can include sensors in your house and really look at, learning algorithms and patterns to see how do you turn it off. That's where artificial intelligence comes into play, to intelligently control how and when to optimize your software features with minimum impact for KPIs and learning, right?
If we drill down that little bit, I always think about this reducing energy consumption. You need to have hardware that's consuming less energy, and I fully buy into the need for the traffic growth. But what type of software capabilities are we talking about?
Yeah, so when it comes to software capabilities, I think the key component to understand is how do you dynamically adjust the use of your hardware with traffic variation, right? In every network has traffic variation. So the key part of software is when there is low traffic, how do you turn it off? And we can do that in different ways. You can turn it off based on day and night usage, or you can turn it off based on millisecond usage. So the software features we have turns off certain components if you want very short wake-up time. So you can turn off your power amplifiers and then wake them up much faster, or you can actually turn off full antenna branches, which takes a little bit longer to wake up, so seconds to maybe wake up. Or you can turn off full cells, where it takes maybe longer to wake up. So depending on the flexibility you have on your network and traffic patterns, essentially it's putting the radio into sleep and waking up at different timelines.
Wow. So this, if I would synthesize this is actually starting to change the different mechanisms here. So not only turning off when we don't use it, it's actually waiting to turn it on until it's needed.
Exactly.
And I think this ML to me is a little bit, almost sounds like it's not only the light sensor that decides if it's dark, we need to switch on the light. It's also censoring things like, are there any people here, any people moving around? Yeah. Then we switch on the light. But if it's dark and no people moving around, then we don't.
Exactly.
Switch it on.
I'm glad that you brought that example, because that's really a shift in the mindset that we are having today, right? So today in our features, we turn off things when we don't need it. But now we introduce a feature called Booster Carrier Sleep, this time we launched at MWC, which is sort of the opposite way. You only turn on the carriers if you need it. So with this Booster Carrier Sleep we just introduced, essentially we have the deep sleep features we've had before. So we really use, the radio has intelligence to use this in a more intelligent way. And also it profiles whether your carriers are coverage or capacity. So we will always have your coverage carrier on, so there's minimum impact on user experience. And then if there is high traffic, that's only when your capacitor carriers get turned on. So it's really a shift in how we've been doing that before.
No, that's like it's like 180-degree shift. And,
Exactly.
Yeah. No, and I think it's really amazing also that is happening. These capabilities are available right now, so we didn't start planning for this when the energy prices started going up. We've been doing this for quite some time.
Yep.
I would like to keep you for some questions, but before we get there, Tura, take us through a little bit over here on the hardware side. One thing that the audience would like to understand is a little bit, what is it in our radios that make them so energy efficient?
Yes, thank you, Peter. Actually, with the power of the Ericsson silicon, we try to develop also more functionality on the top of Ericsson silicon, such as powering off a lot of hardware component and the processing item on the physical hardware in order to save the energy. And that's very important because with this advanced technology, also we start to combine more bands. For example, now we have a radios that's supporting 3 bands, as you can see, radio 4486 and also 4485. Yeah. And as well as we develop even further to have one radio supporting whole site. It means supporting the 3 sector. And we can have it with 2T2R and 44R with the type of 6626 and 6646. And with this advanced functionality, we try to simplify the site. We try also to put more power amplifiers, advanced technology, and also filtering in order to less control the signal and more schedule to the traffic. So with that, we are achieving even more and more energy saving on top of combining the band.
So when we do this, so help us understand a little bit. We're driving the energy consumption here. We're using very advanced ASICs. We're doing that for a number of different generations right now. What impact that does have on size, power, antennas, the whole complex around it, cooling? How are those impacted by the fact that we're driving down energy consumption of the basic radio?
Exactly, because when we advance the functionality that we have it on top of Ericsson silicon, we also have PIM cancellation and we have eCPRI. On top of that, we are moving the processing from the digital component and taking up to the radio side. So from this perspective, we are able to integrate more bands and more processing at the same time. With the smart cooling system, we are advancing the way how to save the energy.
No, it's really cool. Now, what I find fascinating, these radios used to be like way bigger.
Yes.
It's almost not like bus size, but significantly larger. And the fact that we're driving down both size, weight, so it's easier for a tower climber to put them up.
Absolutely.
And also cooling, because like part of the energy is not only about powering up the radio, was used to be part of the cooling. So we're getting in exactly. Passive cooling and those kind of things here. It's very exciting.
I need to take you to the most advanced, the world's lightest ultra light radio, which is this radio. It's 2271, which is 9 kilo only. And we are the world first to achieve this kind of weight. And from this perspective, also 10 kilo, we have it for 44R. This is called 4471. So it's really big achievement how we are advancing Ericsson silicon with also cooling and design, combining all this technology together in small piece.
Now, and for all of you struggling a little bit with acronyms here, don't worry about that. It's 4-letter numbers that we're talking about right now. So 3268 and other amazing things that people should pay attention to. So I would like to check here. Do we have any questions for this session from the audience?
Yes, we have several questions. So let's start with, what can we do first to bring the consumption down?
Okay, maybe I can take
this.
Yep,
the starting point. Where do we start in all of this equation?
Yes, because here we need to look at the network end to end. First of all, we need to put the sustainability plan in our agenda. It means that we need to investigate the network reality. If we have old hardware in very congested site, we need to modernize the hardware. Then on top of that, we need to enable all the software functionality. Why? Because many operators, they have 2 different teams operation and performance. And when they enable the energy saving feature with not right configuration, they might have degradation in the performance, so they just shut down the energy features. Here is our turn with our capability. We have tools that can maintain the user experience by looking at the network from the drive test perspective and also from the cloud source data dashboard, because we are integrating Omlot, Totella, OpenSignal, and you can manage the user experience in one dashboard. So everything is possible if we just combine all the effort together. But we shouldn't forget, we need to operate intelligently. How we operate intelligently, we should use the artificial intelligence and machine learning in our operation. When we run all those algorithms, it means we are sensing the traffic and we try to shut down the component once it's not needed. We have in Taiwan case, Far East Zone, and we were happy to also have the case also with the CEO. We achieve with artificial intelligence and machine learning 25% energy saving with zero KPI impact. So that's why we need to look in holistic view. It's mean end to end. We look at our hardware, we look at our software, make sure that we enable it, and of course do not forget to operate intelligently with artificial intelligence and machine learning. With combined effort from different components, we're gonna get big percentage of the saving.
Really good. No, that's a really good explanation. I think there's one thing that struck me there, the fact that you say that we can do this saving with zero impact on the network KPIs, because that's I think is then you can see, hey, this is absolutely a viable strategy to execute. I think I heard we had another question in from the audience.
Yes, what makes this the best product on the market?
So is this the best product on the market? What do we think there?
I can jump in and maybe Tura, we can tag team on this one. Absolutely. We have the best products in the market. I think if the team hasn't already heard that ABI Research actually recognized our RAN portfolio as the number one. They looked at 80 plus vendors. So really, definitely we do have the best products in the market for each of the categories.
That's really cool. Yep. We're proud of that. Brag a little bit about it. Hope you survive with that. Now we're going to move from the outdoors, the great, amazing outdoors, to the indoors. Pleasure, Roger.
Hello, Peter.
Great to have you here today.
Thank you.
So what can we tell about our US and Canadian friends about what's going on in the indoors with 5G? What is driving the market for 5G indoors?
Absolutely. So the market has certainly been growing. And I think the primary factor is that people are not very happy with the current solutions they have had to date. As you can see, we see 60% of people dissatisfied. Only 10 to 15% of buildings actually have coverage. So we are seeing that operators are not able just with their CapEx to address this market need. And what we have seen a transition happening towards building owners having an interest in putting money on the table, as well as neutral host companies seeing an opportunity where they can use their capital to finance the system and then go back and charge operators to bring in their signals, and then in a shared solution, much more efficiently provide coverage in buildings that in the past were not really affordable. So having a simple solution that's easy to deploy is, I would say, a key factor in the market growth. The second one would be digitalization of factories, in particular businesses, enterprises. They're looking to bring in a private network, use cases that in the past Wi-Fi was not able to address, 4G was not able to address, but now with 5G, with higher bandwidth, better uplink, reliability, security, are all factors that really help bring in a solution that addresses the needs of those enterprises.
Yeah. If we look at this, so it sounds very much like here, it's not okay only to have the other wireless technology inside, yes, that 5G coverage is something that people are expecting to a large extent. We also know that it's harder for certain, the higher bands in 5G to reach through walls and windows and stuff like that. But I see you have a number of different new products here, what we're talking about. What is it that we have advanced here recently? And
so I'm actually, I'll be happy to talk to you about some of the newer products that we have launched. There's basically comprised of 3 solutions. The first one is the indoor fusion unit, which is this unit here you see on the I guess on my left, on your right. So This is a solution where we have integrated the IRU and the baseband in one. For folks that maybe are not familiar, the IRU is like a hub unit where up to 8 dots are aggregated, right, to provide coverage within a building. And for you to typically bring in a dot solution together, it means you bring an IRU, you bring a baseband. The baseband is usually DC power. That means you got to bring a separate power unit to do conversion of AC to DC if you're in a location that only has access to AC power, and then you connect the dots. Well, now we've made that much simpler, where you don't need to do any interconnects between the IRU and the baseband. It's all pre-built for you. It's a common power source where you would power the IRU and the baseband together. So one AC cable for power. You can use your backhaul that you may already have in your location. So of course, every enterprise will have access to internet, some ISP service. Yep. You can actually use that. And then you connect up to 4 dots. So if you have seen our booth here, which is pretty large, we can actually cover this entire Ericsson booth. Yep. With one of these boxes and 4 dots. So that gives you 5G, 4G solution for an enterprise. And then the next product we launched is the IRU 8850. What I've seen in a number of markets is that more and more TDD spectrum is becoming available. What has happened in the US is recently the C-band was auctioned, 280 megahertz, the 3.45 band or DoD band, another 100 megahertz. We already had CBRS, 150 megahertz. T-Mobile's got 194 megahertz. So, I mean, it's a lot of spectrum. How do you deliver all of that? We need more capacity on the IRUs. So here we can do up to 1600 megahertz, so that really all of your TDD bands in the US, as well as FDD bands, can be delivered in one compact unit.
So tell us a little bit, what about now when we see a demand to actually to scale down to smaller and smaller building? What is happening there, and what is driving that?
Yeah, so it's really about having affordable solutions, because in the past it was hard to reach those lower end enterprises with a solution that is really architected to be high capacity. But now by combining an IRU and baseband in one, and maybe just with 1 dot, you'd actually be able to cover quite a bit of square footage, maybe starting with 10,000 square foot, give or take, with 1 dot, and then grow from there. So it's really the affordability factor, I think, with the key one in what equipment you need to bring into a particular venue. The second option that we also provide that some customers who have a dense fiber are looking into, they provide fiber to the premise as a service, as a fixed service. And they can actually use that same fiber to actually use one of our 4G or 5G dots that actually just take in the fiber connectivity, and you can locally power this dot with maybe PoE switch, or actually an AC plug that brings power to a dot. So we have some operators that we have been in discussion with. They're looking to do that when they go to a restaurant or a library, something that is small, medium size. Yep. You bring in your internet service, and all that you need is actually the dot, not even the IRU and baseband, because that's in a central office location.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
I see that you have more dots here. Since we crossed a lot of T's here, what about dotting some I's? And
yes.
Out of this whole portfolio, I remember the small dot here, but help us understand how the dots have evolved here to serve different type of purposes. What do we see here?
Yeah, so I often get the question or the comment, well, the dots have grown or the dots have gained some weight. And sometimes I say, yeah, just like the product manager. But no, the reality is that this dot that was a dual band product that was quite capable in the LTE days, to be able to do the same sort of capacity now that we have more spectrum in 5G, I would actually need about 10 units to be equivalent to one of these larger dots. So from that standpoint, it actually has shrunk in size, right? I don't need 10 dots with 10 cables with 10 IRUs. I only need one with 1 cable and 1 IRU. And the way that the portfolio has really grown, our investment in the last 2-3 years has been all around neutral host multi-operator solutions. Because as we go talk to building owners or enterprises, they say, yes, I want to digitize, I want a private network, but if I'm going to invest in a cellular infrastructure, I also would like to have service from all of the providers in my building. I get horrible coverage. Why not have the same infrastructure provide and solve all of my problems? And this is what we are seeing. And actually, I just heard earlier today that we closed a deal with what I believe is the largest venue we've ever done in the world, but it's located in the West, a 12 million square foot factory where they're going to have both private and the neutral host solution. So it's exciting to see that the enterprises, not just neutral host companies, but enterprises are actually demanding this kind of power and capacity from the indoor product. So that's why, the family has grown, so to speak, but it's really to provide this variety of combination of bands and spectrum and delivering the capacity to address these needs.
A little bit what I find interesting in this is that I used a simple rule of thumb. I used to look at the floor, seeing what kind of wireless do we need here. If there was no carpets, was for clearly cellular.
Right.
If it was carpet, was perhaps Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
But now with these kind of advancements here, especially on the neutral host side, when you can serve all the needs in a building across multiple operators, that's changed the game a little bit and make this as a viable case even in
absolutely. In fact, I would say that the majority of our deployments with radio dot nowadays actually happen in carpeted areas that they already have a Wi-Fi maybe, but it's not sufficient to address all of their use cases and needs. So they want a cellular coverage as well. Of course, for some time, I'm quite sure that Wi-Fi and cellular will coexist. They're addressing different devices, maybe different needs, but clearly Wi-Fi alone is not sufficient.
What about precise positioning in all of this? What can we do indoors for more accurately pinpoint locations of different equipment?
Sure. No, great question. So we, in fact, just announced a couple of weeks ago, as we launched the 2 hardware products that I showed before, we also launched precise 5G positioning. And this is a capability we're adding from our RAN and also from the IRUs and dots, where we're able to do sub-meter location of devices with 5G. What this means is, what's really interesting about this technology is that you don't need an overlay technology. If you had Wi-Fi, for example, typically you had to go with something else, beacons or Zigbee or some other technology. Here, all you need is 5G connectivity. So it could be your smartphone, it could be a moving vehicle that has 5G in there. It's a technology that is going to be available starting next quarter with a band for a manufacturing plant in Europe. And then we'll be adding other bands as well to cover US and Canadian needs. So it will continue to evolve very rapidly, but the response has been quite positive, that within 1 meter or less, and by the way, this is not like GPS that you only have X and Y, it's also on the Z or Z dimension if you're in Canada. So think of a 1 meter cube, that's how precise you are in finding the device.
I think that's really cool. That is not only X, Y, it's a Z dimension as well.
Exactly.
So I see that we have a few questions here from the audience. What are the audience interested in hearing about?
So how does DOTS compare to DAS when it comes to energy usage?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's where actually I spend a lot of my time here during the event talking about this. There was actually a CTO from an operator in Brazil, Tim, that said, so your solution is actually a DAS killer. Yes, he gets it. That's exactly what it is. And why is that? To the question that was asked. We need 80% less space to deploy a neutral host solution than an active.
Space or power?
Space. So if you think about how much space you're going to use, that costs money to rent, that costs money to cool or heat during the winter. None of that is required. You can use that space for other economic use in that building. So that's one big factor. The second one is energy savings, about 70% less energy usage in these systems. So that's huge. But better yet, if we didn't have those two benefits already, it actually costs less. So the point on neutral host dot, according to some of the studies we've done, is 30 to 50% less cost than a traditional active DAS. So, I mean, it's a solution that costs less, a solution that consumes less power, and a solution that uses less space. Why not?
It sounds like the borderlines between a dot-based system and DAS systems are definitely changing with the introduction of these solutions. I think we have some more questions.
Which building segments embrace 5G indoor first?
Good question. From a 5G perspective, I would have to say that it comes from two key segments. The first one was definitely operator-driven in public venues. So you wanted to have in public venues like airports and stadiums similar experience to what you could have on a macro network. So operator CapEx was definitely driving that spend. But the second one would be enterprises looking to digitize their operations. That was also, it has been still driving quite a bit of investment. So between those two, I would say it's hard to say which one. Probably the operator one was first for public venues, and digitalization now going into venues as a second.
Yeah.
Second. Yeah.
That's good. I think there might be some more questions.
Yes. What did this big soccer game teach us this year?
Yeah, the soccer event that happened last year, I guess. So we had an amazing experience. So to us, it was one of the first proof points that we can actually do a neutral host network with a radio dot, where in the past it was really active as turf. So we were able to deliver many terabytes of data in every soccer match that happened in the event in Qatar. So Qatar, as an Ericsson customer, decided to go with the radio dot as a solution for all the 10 stadiums, for the international airport, and for some of the subway stations as well. And they saw a fantastic performance. I mean, some of the results are amazing. We actually beat the records from the Super Bowl 2022 in this fantastic soccer event that happened in Qatar. So we're very proud that we're actually able to do that with the radio dot system. And I think that's just the beginning. There's World Cup coming in the US. In fact, if I had to count of the customers that came talk to us the last couple of days, France was very well represented. A lot of the topic is, can we do this for the Olympics coming up in our country? So I think the interest is quite high, and we're very excited of what is coming ahead.
One final question because you're off the hook.
Final one. Can this be used both private, public, and hybrid network?
I'm sorry, I missed that.
Can this solution be used for public, private, and hybrid networks?
Yes, absolutely. So we have products like this one, .2256, that supports 4 bands. In one of them is CBRS. So you could certainly use CBRS for the private network, and then the remaining of the spectrum for your public neutral host network solution. So that is one possibility, but there's other. You can mix and match different dots depending on the use case. This location that I mentioned before, 12 million square foot area, they decided to separate the two because they wanted to keep the private network control completely separate and isolated from the neutral host. So they are deploying 2 dots in their facility side by side. So that's certainly an option. So it really depends on what the customer wants, but all is possible here with the
this is really good. Thank you very much. It's interesting to see how this family has grown and that we now have can address a broader spectrum of opportunities, and the fact that the timing of that is very much with, everybody's starting to expect 5G to work indoors as well.
Absolutely.
And there's ways to solve it for everybody.
Yeah.
So thank you very much, Roger. So with that, we're going to move over here and talk a little bit about what's going on in the transport side of the house, what's going on in the site side of the house. So we're going to start with you here, Robert. Warm welcome.
Nice to see you.
Yeah. So we're talking about energy efficient networks here. How is this resonating with the conversations for the transport side of the house?
Yes, so it is an increasing trend that operators are starting to look at energy efficiency aspects when they evaluate transport network solutions. So this is both valid for new deployment type of scenarios and also expansion scenarios. And if you look at like a global or total power consumption of an operator, transport networks share is relatively minor, but still there are some significant savings to make and efficiencies to introduce.
Yeah. Now it's pretty amazing. And is this affecting both the microwave side of the house and the optical side of the house, or where is it in play?
Yes, I think it goes across the board, as capacity increase is valid for all type of transport scenarios. So microwave backhaul sites, router backhaul sites, and optical front haul sites also have to be more energy efficient as we move forward.
Yeah, but this game is not only about the energy consumption as well. Here it's very much about, like, we're changing quite a bit in the topology.
Yes.
So we're centralizing baseband,
Yes.
and perhaps we're introducing. We just talked about the indoor solution, distributed certain things
Yes.
further out. How is this whole game affected by this?
Yeah, so centralized architecture is a way of building networks. It's a tool in a toolbox, and one of the main efficiencies that it brings is that it provides opportunities to simplify the site. Mm-hmm. We are removing parts of the RAN processing functions and moving them to a centralized location where they can be used more efficiently. So this inherently reduces power consumption, plus we can optimize the site power and cooling infrastructure. So this can result up to even 40% power savings, as some of our deployments show.
Yeah. So if we look at all the different transport products we have right now, which one is the one generating the most of attention for you here?
So I think this year we are really happy because we have news for every single segment. Oh. So we can start with the microwave. We are releasing new products with more carriers and more energy efficiency. We are releasing new routers with more energy efficiency. And of course, optical solutions, higher speed and higher capacity. So all across the board.
All across the board. How... For the audience, microwave, what is the peak transmission levels that you're talking about right now?
So if you talk about traditional bands, now we have released a product that can do 5 gigabit per second using 4 carriers in a single box.
Yeah.
If you talk about E-band and multi-band solutions, we can go up to 10, 20 gigabit per second. So easily and convenient to serving a 5G mid-band site. Yeah.
Do you see that the microwave is coming into the middle mile or the second mile right now to feed fiber networks?
With these capacities and availabilities, it is actually possible, yes. In many parts of the world, microwave is a very, very significant transmission technology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the reason for asking is I see questions coming up more and more right now that
yes.
there's a lot to build out in the access. Everybody understands
yes.
that, but often that the second mile sometimes is forgotten.
Yes,
and
exactly. And now we have like systems up to 40 gigabit per second capacity. They can easily aggregate more sites and feed it back to a fiber infrastructure.
Yeah. Really interesting to hear. Thank you very much. I'll keep you a little bit for some questions here, but before that, I think we've got one of the most amazing parts here, Abhishek. You're going to help us understand what's really going on a site and how has this site evolved over the last few years.
Great. So, pleasure to be here. And in a short term, as you asked, what's going on here is basically that we are keeping on the lights, literally. So. Because, as you know, this is the envisionment of ours, how we would like to see the sites globally. And from an evolution standpoint, we don't leave any areas, be it thermodynamics, electrical, in terms of improvement. Mm-hmm. Because why we consider this more important is because in site solutions, we are exchanging power in different formats, like from utility voltages to DC-48 in a very high capacity. Like here, what you see behind me is one of our key products having 31 kilowatts of power system embedded in it. So even if you have like 4 to 5% improvement from the current market standpoints, when you multiply that savings to 31 kilowatts, that's quite a lot of watts you have there. Mm-hmm. In the thermodynamics section, as you see the door, which has evolved in various versions over the years, specifically for telecom uses, we urge our customers coming from indoor shelters, like 12 by 12 feet shelters, to a footprint like this, which is essentially less than 6 square feet. What is happening here is that we reduce aircon consumption to the tune of 1,500 watts to 300, 350 watts here, without any refrigerant gases, without any compressors, and have still a filterless technology, having 2 separate air loops where the airs never mix. They just exchange heat across an aluminum foil. So we get away with changing filters forever, and that is one reduced service item right there.
No, but it's like, since there's so many moving parts in a site, I guess getting rid of each and every item that can be serviced. Yeah. So what else is part of, when we look at the whole transition here, we're seeing that we're moving towards more like the batteries has always been there for backup, but we also working with quite a lot of innovation for actually how these sites are powered. Not all of them has to be diesel generated.
Correct.
What's going on there?
Correct. So what's going on here is from a powering options perspective, in our current generation, we keep our enclosures solar and wind ready. What that means is that all of these enclosures are safety rated for a solar upgrade. Because solar and wind, and especially solar, involves high voltage DC to come outside of, let's say, solar panels, being converted into 48 negative energy to be used with the batteries and the backplane of the whole load. So what we're doing here is evolving the power efficiency in the PSUs, as I just spoke about, but also having a greater flexibility as to how renewable ready our system is. In a matter of speaking, the customer can also choose to not have solar on day one, but after 1 year of deployment or 2 year deployment, certain selected sites can be upgraded to renewable power supplies.
Yeah.
Just by slotting one MPPT slot in and connecting the outdoor solar panels. Yeah. So that is a flexibility right there.
So when we discussed a little bit before how we also talked a little bit about how these things are managed.
Oh, yes.
What should we think about there?
Oh, yes. So management in site solutions has become quite critical. As you can imagine, this is all critical infrastructure. And the management also has to be on a security layer closer to the baseband. So what we did is that on the same platforms of the baseband Explorer in E&M, we have basically added the control layer of the PSUs, of the solar panels, and also high voltage boost, also the battery. So all of these are managed by one single controller, the site controller, on an IPsec layer, which is fully secured in that manner of speaking. So you can have management, you can have measurement also in terms of, like, for example, renewable energy, that how much percentage of renewable energy is being produced at a site. We can actually measure that on real time, basically.
Wow, that's really good.
Yeah.
So I think we'll leave with some questions for the audience here after covering these pieces. What should we start with?
So how much this is designated towards Ericsson products? Like how well this is integrated with other vendors' technologies?
Yeah, so perhaps a question here regarding the site solution here. Which of these things that we see here are targeting just Ericsson products, and how could it be applied broader? How have we been thinking there?
Yeah. Yeah, maybe I can take one that. I mean, from a verifications perspective, how we are doing is that, as we just spoke, there are various sources of power, like solar, wind, the utility itself, and then the lithium-ion battery as well for energy storage, as you know. So what this presents us with is also a challenge of how integrated in software all of these things are. Because if you see, the lithium-ion batteries, they can be managed to a very high degree when we compare it with the legacy, let's say, lead-acid batteries. You can have real-time temperature monitoring in the lithium-ion batteries. Also, the charge level is more predictable. Yeah. So the verification, what it gives us in the whole Ericsson ecosystem is that all of these units are one-touch wireable, and then there is no requirement of, let's say, any software updations or any kind of configuration needed in case of third party, if we have more components from third parties, for example. So that saves us a lot of time in terms of installations.
Well, that's really good.
Yeah.
Did we have a question?
Yes. So, what customer cases do you have as a proof point?
For the sites or for the transmission or for the site?
On the site.
Okay, what customer points do you have for the sites?
So the biggest one we have today is the Deutsche Telekom in Dittenheim with integration of solar power, wind power, and we have given quantified measure of renewable power to the customer, basically defining that how much quantum of energy is coming from renewable sources vis-a-vis utility. And all in a seamless integrated way, because we've had days where we'd had like 17% of generation. We had days where we had 100% of generation. Yep. So on a seamless level, that integral is present with the customer on a real-time basis, that how much renewable we can really have.
That sounds really good. Do you have any final questions?
Final question for transport. So, what product improvements has Ericsson done lately?
So if you look at the product, the question is about product improvements. What are the product improvements we've done lately on the transport side?
Sure. So we have just announced a new microwave radio up here, as you can see. It's a quad radio, meaning it can serve 4 microwave carriers in a single unit, providing up to 5 gigabit per second capacity in this single unit. And at the same time, it decreases the power consumption and the required space up in the tower by 50%. Also, for the existing radios, we have released new software. So in principle, we can put these radios into a deep sleep mode when the capacity is not needed. So we can save an additional almost 20% energy saving on the existing deployed mini-link radios that are there in the network. And then if you come to the router side of the house, we have released 2 new routers that you can see here, the router 6676, 6678. These are all using the latest forwarding technology, and these have like energy efficiency as a design cornerstone. So they have 3 times more energy efficiency compared to the previous product that they are replacing.
Well, that's remarkable. So I think with that, thank you very much, Robert. With that, I think we're getting ready to wrap up this session. What we wanted to get across for you tonight, or today in the US and Canada, is essentially about the big picture of energy efficient network. We want to get across to you so you see a little bit what we've been doing on the radio side. What are the kind of software, hardware, and AI capabilities that you can do to reduce the network energy consumption. We also went indoors and talked a lot about what can be done, both neutral host and how we can scale that down and to a large variety of products, and actually that we can actually provide an alternative to the DAS solution that is very common today. And the last bit here, we covered the transport and the site solution. So I hope you have really got a good grip and a good overview of the session. This is the second session in this series, and we're going to continue tomorrow with the third program, which is about cloud-based networking. Before you leave, think through, was this a useful session? Share it with colleagues. If you want any support, any follow-up or anything, reach out to your key account manager or send me a mail. My mail address is peter.linder@ericsson.com. Thank you very much for your attention tonight. Bye-bye.